Hello, everybody. I'm Golda, and I handle library marketing for Norton. Thank you for tuning in today. In this video, I'll tell you about books for kids and teens that are being published in the beginning of 2022. You can find more Book Buzz videos on my YouTube channel with videos about books that are available now and publishing later this fall. I'm starting with Norton Young Readers, and here are some of our recent and forthcoming titles. From a Whisper to a Rallying Cry by Paula Yu was recently longlisted for the National Book Award. It also won the Boston Globe Horn Book Award for nonfiction, and it has been chosen for Read Across America for May 2022 by the National Education Association. Also for teens, we have a new memoir by Rex Ogle called Punching Bag, which tells about his high school years and deals with some tough topics, but it does still have some hope, and the reader can see that Rex made it through. Feminist AF is a guide to crushing girlhood by Brittany Cooper, Susanna Morris, and Chanel Craft Tanner, and is an amazing resource for teens and really for anyone. For our younger readers, I want to point out Voyage of the Sparrowhawk, which is a middle grade historical fiction set just after World War I, and it's full of adventure and friendship. I also loved Only Ants for Andy and Dad Bakes and Doing Business and Amelia Earhart, and well, I loved all of them. You can hear more about these titles in the fall 2021 video on my YouTube channel. Somewhere in the Bayou is the new picture book by Jarrett and Jerome Pumphrey, who also wrote and illustrated The Old Truck and The Old Boat. The Old Truck was given an honor in the writing category from the Ezra Jack Keats Awards. Somewhere in the Bayou uses their familiar stamp-based illustrations, but this one has more humor than the last two picture books, and this is more like a fable. These four creatures are walking through the bayou and need to find a place to cross the river. They find a useful log, but there's a mysterious tail next to it. The first three creatures each make assumptions about the tail, and when they behave according to those assumptions instead of learning from what they have observed, they suffer the repercussions. The mouse pays attention though, and he ends up finding a way across that I'm not going to spoil for you, but it is fun. The illustrations are deceptively simple. There are layers to each one. And the way that Jarrett and Jerome are able to change the expressions of the creatures just by changing the eyes is really quite delightful. Big Ship Rescue is the new picture book by Chris Gall, who did Big Rig Rescue for us, and has also written and illustrated many other books, including Jumbo and Dino Trucks. His illustrations have a cartoony or Playmobil-like look to them, but they are all accurate. Big Ship Rescue takes the reader through what happens when a big ship hits trouble and needs help. From the helicopters to rescue the crew, to divers to check for damage underwater, to the tugboat captains. Everyone has an important role to play in rescuing the people and the ship. The book shows the importance of teamwork and appeals to anyone fascinated by all these various vehicles, while also giving you a dramatic rescue story featuring a female salvage boat captain and a happy ending. Now I have an introduction to the Big Bang. In How to Bake a Universe, author Alec Carvlin and illustrator Brian Biggs use baking as a way to cook up a fun picture book that introduces you to the concepts of the Big Bang. It all starts with nothing. Then you add a lot of heat and some atoms, wait a little while, and the planets will start popping up. Eventually, the universe is ready. But like the book says, the universe isn't complete until it belongs to everyone. There are extra pages at the back of the book that explain the science behind the baking metaphors, a glossary of terms, and a timeline. Altogether, the book uses bright and fun illustrations and a comic story as an ingenious way to convey a concept that's almost impossible to represent conventionally. Teddy Roosevelt was a moose? This is the fourth book in the Wait What biography series by Dan Gutman. This series is aimed at grades 2 and up, and each one is fast-paced and fact-filled with lively illustrations. Did you know that Teddy Roosevelt was shot before a rally and went on to give his speech with a bullet in his chest? Bet you didn't know that he had a zebra, a lion, and a one-legged rooster at the White House. Siblings Page and Turner have collected some of the most unusual and surprising facts about the larger-than-life president, from his childhood and his Rough Rider days to his rise to politics and his complicated presidential legacy. Narrated by the two spirited siblings, Teddy Roosevelt Was a Moose is an authoritative and accessible biography infused with Dan Gutman's signature zany sense of humor. The three previous books in the series are all available now in hardcover, paperback, and ebook. Racing Storm Mountain by Trent Reedy is the second in a loosely connected outdoor adventure novel series. Each of these books stands on its own, but they are set in the same town and feature some recurring characters. Hunter's Choice is coming out in paperback in January, and Racing Storm Mountain comes out in hardcover in February. In this novel, Kelton Fielding wants to impress his classmates by fixing up an old snowmobile for a race at the annual winter festival. When race day comes, bad weather is closing in, and there's a risk of an avalanche on the mountain. Kelton, Hunter, and the other kids find themselves in real danger, relying on their wits and teamwork to survive. A lot of adult and YA librarians are already familiar with Mary Roach and her best-selling science and nature titles like Stiff and Fuzz. Now I'm excited to introduce her to a younger audience with Packing for Mars for Kids. This middle grade adaptation of Packing for Mars was done by Mary Roach herself, and it features her signature humor, curiosity, and willingness to dig into this stuff that will really interest kids. Like, how do you go to the bathroom in zero gravity? What is it like to fly? Eating and bathing or not bathing on a spaceship, and more. The book is filled with photographs of real astronauts and real situations, and is packed with firsthand experiences and thorough research. Moving on to a more serious topic, Courage, My Story of Persecution is the third book in our Eyewitness series of firsthand narrative written by young activists. This series has been produced in collaboration with Dave Eggers, the Hawkins Project, and the International Congress of Youth Voices. In Courage, Freshta Tori Jan tells her own story of growing up as a girl and as part of an ethnic minority in Afghanistan. Her family faced kidnappings and daily murder attempts on the bus, on the way to school, and in the workplace and beyond. Freshta's school was shut down by the Taliban, and some of her friends were murdered and shot. Her journey through poverty, terrorism, and other forms of injustice has enabled her to be a voice for those unable to share their stories and those unable to receive the opportunities that she has. She and her family fled to India, and then Freshta got the chance to come to school in the USA. She is now a college student, and she believes in empowering youth in order to bring about change and be the leaders of today and tomorrow. With a voice that is both accessible and engaging, Freshta brings forward a captivating first-person account of strength, resilience, and determination, and delivers a compelling narrative. The first two books in the Eyewitness series, Accused and Hurricane, are publishing in hardcover this month. Adama Ba and Salvador Gomez Colon participated in a Norton Young Readers preview for us this past spring, so I'll link to that video in the description. Our Weird, Wild, Amazing books by biologist Tim Flannery will satisfy the curiosity of all your young animal enthusiasts. The paperbacks are divided up by habitat, so Water and Forest come out in October, and Sky and Desert will come out next April. The Hat Makers by Thames and Merchant is the first book in a middle grade fantasy series, and it comes out in paperback in February. The second book, The Map Makers, is scheduled for summer of 22, and I'm really looking forward to seeing where Tamsin takes the characters next. Crossing the Stream and Playing a Dangerous Game are two middle grade novels that are part of our partnership with Accord Books to publish books by African authors in the USA. Elizabeth Irene Beatty is from Ghana and Patrick Ochieng is from Kenya. Both novels are suitable for ages 10 and up, and they are both available in hardcover now. Our next book from Accord is for teens. Even When Your Voice Shakes by Ruby Yera Goga tells the story of teenage Amerly growing up in Ghana who wants to be a fashion designer. Her mother is depressed and unable to work, and the family is barely getting by. When her mother's friend offers Amerly a job as a maid in her home in Accra, Amerly reluctantly leaves her own home and goes to work, but she keeps her other dreams alive. While working for this family, two of the sons sexually assault Amerly. Torn between keeping quiet to keep her job and speaking up for herself and for justice, Amerly must decide how to live her truth, and the impact of her choice will be felt throughout her entire community. Through the life of an ordinary girl from a small country village, Even When Your Voice Shakes exposes the damage wrought by institutionalized misogyny and poverty, and reveals how even those who are most disadvantaged are never without their own power. All three of these authors spoke on a webinar for Booklist last June, which I will link to in the description. Now I'm switching over to one of our distributed publishers, Thames and Hudson. They have some great art and history titles for kids, but also a ton of lovely and funny picture books. If I Had a Kangaroo is the latest in the If I Had series. This time, the young girl who wishes for all sorts of different pets travels to Australia to dream about what it would be like to have a kangaroo. The rhyming text and bright illustrations will enchant any kid who wishes for an unusual pet. And you might just get some requests for a pet dinosaur, or octopus, or sloth, or maybe a unicorn. Apple Grumble is the equally silly sequel to Bad Apple. If you haven't read Bad Apple yet, spoiler alert, the bad apple survived his encounter with the snake. And now he's grumpy. Can Granny Smith and the other apples teach him some manners? Probably not. Though it looks like at least he's learned the word please. Kids will delight in the bad behavior of the apple, and maybe they'll learn a lesson, but probably not. Okay, back to the serious subjects. The Brainiacs book of the climate and weather is an introduction for grades 2 and up. It covers the difference between climate and weather, cloud spotting, temperature changes, rain, wind, and more. There are lots of activities and experiments that don't require too many supplies and would be easy to do. The illustrations and text demonstrate how fun and relevant science is to our everyday lives. This book makes the subject interactive, interesting, and relatable for young readers. Should all drugs be legalized? This is part of the Big Idea series from Thames and Hudson. Each book in the series tackles one big idea and looks at the topic from all different angles. There are tons of photos and illustrations, and the text is accessible to teens and high schoolers, as well as college students and adults. You can find a full list of the Big Idea books on the Thames and Hudson website, and I'll put a link to that page in the description for the video. From Abbeville Press, we have Sarah Ball's latest flip book. Build a Bug lets you flip and turn sections of a page to create hundreds of different creatures out of the elements of 10 different bugs. There are facts about the bugs on the back of each flap, so you can read more about them and learn about them. These are a lot of fun to play with, and they're printed on a sturdy cardboard, so they won't get damaged easily. Tilbury House is another one of our distributed publishers. They have wonderful picture books and middle grade titles that tackle nature, science, social emotional learning, Black joy, and all sorts of topics. The first blade of Sweetgrass came out in August. It's a lovely story of tradition, learning from your ancestors, and mindfulness that gives the reader a glimpse into the Wabanaki tradition of gathering sweetgrass. I Am Smoke has really gorgeous illustrations and uses a poetic text to tell you all about the different uses and characteristics of smoke. And the artist actually used the smoke from a candle and the shapes that it makes on paper as the base for her illustrations. So I could talk about these books all day, but I better move on to the new ones. Not a Cat by Winter Miller. Have you ever felt like you can't be defined by one label? Well, Gatto does not think that the label cat is an accurate description of him. Yes, he might have the physical elements that typically make up a cat, but he's so much more. Maybe he's a bee or a duck or a horse. He has ridden in the subway and flown on a plane, so maybe he's a person. Ultimately, Gatto concludes that he can do all of those things and be himself. Winter Miller's own cat was the inspiration for this story, and that's him in the bottom right corner playing cards. You can find more pictures of Gatto on Instagram at Wintygram. It's super cute. Good Eating by Matt Lilly looks at the food chain and the importance of krill in that food chain. Just 2 inches long when full grown, krill are the largest animals able to catch and eat phytoplankton, and they in turn are eaten by the largest animals living on Earth, blue whales, as well as by seals, penguins, and a host of others. In other words, krill are really good at eating and they make really good eating. And that makes them the most important animals in the high latitude oceans. The book has been reviewed and endorsed by global krill expert, Dr. Stephen Nicol, and I have been assured the particular star krill of this book does go on to eat for another day. Sometimes it's really hard to make a choice. In This or That by Kel Andrews, young Alexander can't decide on a Halloween costume, so he winds up as a pumpkin. He can't decide what to wear to school, so he misses the bus. He can't decide what school lunch to eat, so he winds up with tuna casserole. I actually like tuna casserole, but maybe not at school lunch. Should he make decisions slowly and deliberately like his mother, who is a judge? Or should he make quick snap decisions like his father, the umpire? Eventually, he has to figure out his own decision-making style. And he learns, like with the case of his new baby sibling, he doesn't always get to decide. Keepers of the Reef takes children to the underwater world of Australia's Great Barrier Reef for a prime example of how a complex ecosystem depends on its keystone species. Sharon Wismer, reef ecologist, is the best tour guide a kid could have for a visit to the underwater world of Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Alice Wong's richly detailed, accurate watercolors feature a boy and girl snorkeling to see the fishes that maintain the ecological balance between the corals and their main competitor, algae. Without the fish species that brush, crop, scrape, excavate, and browse the algae, coral reefs would die. The book has a strong environmental message, and there is more information at the back of the book that talks about what we can do to protect these ecosystems. I Begin with Spring by Julie Dunlap is for ages 9 and up and mixes biographical elements from the life of Henry David Thoreau with information about climate change. The book features some of Thoreau's own sketches, in addition to illustrations by Megan Barata. The book's 2 organizing themes, the chronology of Thoreau's life and the seasonal cycle beginning with spring, interact seamlessly on every spread, suggesting the correspondence of human seasons with nature's. Thoreau's annual records of blooms, bird migrations, and other natural events scroll in a timeline across the page bottom. And the back matter includes a summary of how those dates have changed from this day to ours, and what that tells us about the science of phenology and climate change. And really quickly, I wanted to give a shout out to the Well-Trained Mind Press, which is a leading publisher of books for homeschooling and supplemental education. These books would also work in libraries, classrooms, and for independent reading. They're publishing a coloring book to go along with their Story of the World History series. This will have 60 coloring pages, and the adjacent captions give the context behind the picture. And Well-Trained Mind Press also publishes Jim Weiss's audio stories. This new one on the adventurous life of Teddy Roosevelt would actually be a good tie-in to the new kids biography from Dan Gutman that I presented earlier in the video. So I know that was a lot of books. I'm putting links in the description to our catalogs and our resource pages. I will also add the link to subscribe to our seasonal newsletter about kids and teen books, where I try to have an ARC giveaway as often as possible. We also post a lot of digital ARCs on Edelweiss and NetGalley, so please check those out. And please reach out to me with any questions. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you for all of the work that you do for your communities. We really appreciate it. Thanks again.